and we are asked to find what happens to the steady state, i.e. this thing, this point where savings depreciation lines meet. The steady state, of course, is not just a steady state K star, it's a steady state also for the level of output. So someone who came to ask me a question reminded me to say something else, well, not to say something else, to repeat what I said earlier about exam technique. Many answers to this part of the question were tempted, for some reason, I know not what, to go into a complete derivation of the solid growth model, which is great that you know it, but I mean, I felt sad when delivering 0 marks to someone who'd written out a perfect derivation of the solid model, but it's not asked for in the question, so there's no credit for it. So don't do it. You just need to lay out the bare bones. You need these equations, and you need this diagram. And of course, you need to explain, when you use this diagram and use those equations, what you're doing. But you're not expected to derive or even to state assumptions unless you're asked to do that. Conversely, just like many people answered a question that wasn't there, many of you didn't answer the question that was there. Most of you stopped before the last sentence of this question, where you asked not just to find the steady state, but to show, by plotting over time, the path of convergence, transition from one steady state, the existing one, to the new one that's going to result from high population growth. So by compounding those two mistakes, answering a question that was not there, and not answering one that was there, you probably cost yourself 50% of the marks and wasted a lot of time that could have been used for another question. I won't bore you with this harangue anymore about exam technique, but I'll try not to. But please take it to heart. Okay, so this is a relatively easy question. You raise the growth rate. What effect does that have on the solid diagram? Where does the growth rate appear? It appears as the gradient of the thing that I've been calling the depreciation line, the red line. So you raise the n, you make that gradient steeper, delta plus n, going up. So that line pivots around the origin to the left. I've drawn the new one in green. I've drawn an old rate of population growth, n1, and a new higher rate of population growth, n2. That's the green line. So what happens to the steady state? Well, it starts here, where blue and red, saving existing depreciation lines intersect, using that capital stock to get steady state output person from the production function, and then that all changes. We go to this green line, section between green and blue. Steady state is now here, and there's a stupid mistake here which no one has pointed out, or maybe you were about to point out that I done something very foolish. She's not read off the correct height for the level of output of the person. I read that off from the savings line, which was silly. You need to read off from the production function to get output. So, steady state goes down, the capital labour ratio, down for output per person. What though about the transition? So the question was expecting that you complement this diagram with two time paths or dynamic diagrams showing plots of K can you now fill in those diagrams? I will start you off. So being in a steady state, of course, means so long as you're there, nothing changes. So plotted against time, if the economy started in this steady state, before the population growth rate changed, it would remain there. Likewise, output, if nothing changed, it would remain y1 star. Then we will think, for simplicity, that at some point in time the population growth rate goes from n1 to n2. In reality, of course, that wouldn't happen overnight. But all questions, of course, have simplifications in them. Don't make your life difficult by trying to answer a more complicated question. Take it as the easiest one that you can. And the easiest case to consider is one where n1 goes straight away to the new higher value n2. So after this point in time here, population growth rate increases. So what would come after in these two diagrams? Have a go drawing that down. So have you built it? Have you built this? What will these look like? What happens? Well, the best way to approach these diagrams is first to figure out where will you end. And you'll end, of course, at the new steady state, which is lower. Okay. So at some point, you're going to end up at this level of capital labor ratio K2 star. Likewise, for output, you're going to end up at some point at Y2 star. The only question is, how quickly is that going to happen? And I'm really expecting a sketch here. I'm not expecting something that is precise. So clearly the question is just, is it instantaneous or is it slow? Those are really the only two cases you could reasonably draw. anything else will be going into more detail than we expect in this kind of course. So do we go straight away to K2? So I make this as a kind of step down, instantaneous adjustment. Likewise, output, immediate step down. Is that right? No, it's not right, because the variable K, of course, is the capital stock, and that is a variable where much of what you're using is a stock. The stock of capital is already there. Of course, you're changing the amount gradually over time because you might be adding more or not maintaining what you've got. But it's not going to be radically changing from one year to the next. So adjustment's going to be slow wherever we are concerned with capital. So what should I draw? Something that gradually approaches the new steady state, something like that. What about output? Well, output here, remember, is just read off from the production function. So if K is slow moving towards the new steady state, it follows output must also be slow moving towards the new steady state. And the reason output is changing is because capital is changing. Therefore, slow movement of capital will mean slow movement also of output. So qualitatively the same kind of pattern. How would you see that from the diagram above? Well, you would look at the diagram above and you'd ask, okay, previously red and blue lines, they intersected at this steady state, so saving and the needs of maintaining the capital stock, appreciation and population growth, they were in balance. Now we have faster population growth, so those needs have grown, now at the green line, and we now have a discrepancy between the saving we do, what we need to keep K at K1 star. It's not enough. This distance here is the amount of capital a person will lose as a result of this change in the first year. Then we would go next year, we look at this discrepancy. That would tell us how much we're going to lose. It's a smaller amount. After that we have another loss, but it's not smaller. You can see these steps are getting smaller and smaller. As you're getting closer and closer, the steps are getting smaller. That's why we draw it with this shape. But you can see that the step is not going to, in general, be enough to go the whole distance in one time, 1 year. That's why we draw it like that. Now, as a result of these steps getting smaller and smaller, the movements along the production function, each year they get smaller and smaller as well. So the output steps get smaller and smaller. So again, we draw the pattern. I'm not really bothered that it has exactly this shape. It's just it's generally more correct to draw it like this than to draw something that has the opposite curvature, that's going down slower initially and then goes faster. Here, the larger adjustment is the beginning, and then it slows down. Clearly, that has to happen as you get closer to the new steady state. Okay, so that's combined with some explanation. That will be that's a full 6 marks. Don't just draw diagrams with no explanation. On the other hand, I'm not expecting an essay. Just a few sentences saying what we're doing, describing the features here. So we shift this line, we see how the steady state changes, and then we describe this gradual process of conversion. That's enough for the 6 marks. Okay, part B.